Hello everyone, my name is Brittany and I want to welcome you to the second vlog for Be the Influence. You just gotta be you. So the title for this vlog is The Leaking Church. The objective is to show you the importance of attending church even when the church is leaking. Considering it's common for believers to have these unanswered questions that can sometimes make them stop believing altogether, I want to begin with 2 points. Our first point is that while your questions are going unanswered, you must remember that God is patient with you. He's not going to answer a question for you that you truly aren't ready for. Because if God answers your questions prematurely, it will damage you, and God doesn't want you to be damaged. So he takes his time and gives you the time to mature and become ready for the answer that you're looking for. So instead of allowing your unanswered question to make you stop believing, figure out why he's not answered your question just yet. And then the second point, this one is really important, mainly for my generation. The second point is that we must remember all unasked questions will forever be unanswered. And I think the fear in asking God questions comes from the Christian misinterpretation that we're not allowed to question God. Because for my generation, for the millennials, it's in our nature to ask questions. We are wanderers. We question everything that comes to us. And so if we're taught not to question God, it's so easy for us to eventually, as life teaches us things, it's easy for us to stop believing altogether. But it's also important for us to know that it's not what you ask, but how you ask. And so we have to ask God questions in order to have a relationship with him, because that's how any relationship works. You must have that two-way street to where it's I can ask you and you can ask me. That's a relationship. For me personally, I remember when I graduated college, I allowed my unanswered questions to make me stop going to church. College had taught me so much that it went against what my reality had been my entire life. And so I would ask God questions, and because I was not ready, he didn't answer them. And so eventually I just stopped asking altogether and I stopped going to church. And so while I stopped going to church, it was easier for me to feed the desires of my flesh. So I was drinking more, smoking more, partying more, like every day felt like my birthday, literally. And I noticed that at that time, I began to put my mission for success on the back burner. There was a day I was talking to my best friend and I explained to her, why I didn't want to go to medical school anymore. I told her I no longer want to go because I know I'm going to have to stop smoking in order to complete that mission. And I'm not going to stop smoking, so I'm just not going to go. What? And we laughed about it, but I was dead serious. I really meant that. Because I didn't want to stop smoking, I wasn't going. And so it was at that point, maybe like a few weeks or a few days later, that I felt like God enrolled me into the school of hard knocks. I literally ran into mistake wall after mistake wall. And then eventually I got tired of bumping my head. And so I began to slow down a little. I stopped hanging with some of the people I had begun to hang with. While I didn't stop smoking and partying as quickly as I should have, it eventually calmed down. And I began to focus inward. I began to focus on my inner self and figure out how I could move to my next step. And so it was at that point that God began to notice, all right, Brittany is really trying. And so he began to reach out his hand towards me and save me from myself. Now, while he was reaching out his hand, I can guarantee you it was not, a nice grab. It wasn't like, oh, come here, boo boo. No, it wasn't none of that. It was more so like, you remember when you were a kid and your mother would tell you to come here after you had just did something. But it was more so of a welcoming come here. And as soon as you would get over there, she would pop the mess out of you. That's what it was, you know. But at the end of the day, I know that it was pruning. You know, while God grabbed me, he snatched me, but it was for my good. And so during that moment, when God pulled me up, we began to develop a relationship. You know, he began to show me my wrongs. He began to show me what I was doing that was right. We honestly developed a relationship because of the necessary steps that I began to make. And so throughout that relationship, the closer I got with God, I began to hear him tell me, Brittany, it's time for you to get back in church. And so I developed these excuse bubbles as to why now was not a good time. And as I blew up these bubbles of excuses, God began to pop each individual bubble. It was like every time I came up with a reason, God was able to get that handled. And so I think for most of you, you have formulated these excuses and developed these excuses as to why you no longer want to attend church or refuse to go at all. When I was in 7th grade, I had an English teacher who made us memorize a poem. And the poem didn't mean anything to me until I got to college, but I never could forget it. So it reads, excuses. Excuses are monuments of nothingness. They build bridges to nowhere. Those who use these tools of incompetence are masters of nothingness. Excuses. So our first bubble is one that a lot of people live by. I don't have to go to church in order to have a relationship with God. So I want us to imagine that we've just enrolled into a course. We signed up to take this class, and we go pick up our book, and we come up with this master plan that we're going to teach ourselves everything we need to know from this book, skip every class, and still show up to take the exams. I can guarantee you that at the end of that course, you are going to fail. Because while you may be able to teach yourself everything that you can from that book, you've missed this book being explained to you by someone who has a different level of wisdom than you. Someone who has taught this subject for years, and if not years, has had to take the subject themselves. So you're missing that opportunity, because while you might be wise, while you might be intelligent, there are ways that that person with more wisdom than you could have paraphrased that book in order to give you a better understanding. Not to mention, you've missed group assignments, any projects, take-home exams, extra credit. You've missed all the other minor things that make up your grade. The church serves as your schoolhouse for the walk with Christ. Our next bubble, honestly, it's an elephant in the room, but Be the Influence is created to help us conquer the elephants that are in our room. This bubble says, the church hurt me. And so in order to truly pop this bubble, we have to be honest with ourselves. Because somewhere throughout life, we have hurt someone or are going to hurt someone. Be it something that we say, something we do, or something that we don't do. We're gonna cause pain to someone else. And typically, we will pray to God for forgiveness. And sometimes we're even bold enough to step to that person and ask for forgiveness. And I can guarantee you that every time you ask God for forgiveness, He's going to forgive you. But you cannot live life asking for forgiveness and not be willing to forgive other people. I do want to bring up a story in the Bible, Matthew 18, verses 21 through 35. And I'm going to encourage you to read it for yourself because I'm about to give you the Brittany paraphrase, so stay with me. So at this point in the Bible, Peter comes to Jesus and he asks, how many times do I have to continue to forgive people that backstab me? Because honestly, I only have about 7 more times and that's it. And so Jesus replied to him and said, Peter, it's honestly unlimited. Not 7, but 77. There's no limit as to how many times I require you to forgive those that go against you. Jesus then goes into the parable of the king who approached all his servants and let them know, if you owe me, it's time to repay those debts. And so there was one servant who couldn't repay. He basically let the king know, right now is a hard time. I don't have it, but I will have it. I just don't have it now, and I don't know when I'm going to have it. And so the king responded, okay, until you can get me the money, I'm going to sell you, your wife, your children, and everything you owe. I'm selling it all. And so the servant dropped to his knees, begged for mercy, and the king said, okay, I'll have mercy on you and your family. You can leave and I'll wipe your debt. And so a while later, that servant ran into another servant who owed him money. And so he basically like hemmed the man up and was like, I need my money. And so the second servant was like, listen, I don't have it. You know, right now it's just not a good time. I'm down on my luck. I don't have it. And so the first servant imprisoned the man and let him know, until you can come with my money, I'm imprisoning you. And so other servants heard of this and they went to the king and they let him know, you know, the man you just let go just imprisoned somebody for the same reason. So the king found the first servant and he was like, you wicked. You are a real wicked man. I just forgave you for owing me way more than the second servant owed you. And you couldn't forgive him? So what he did was he locked the first servant up. Not only did he lock him up, but he then had him tortured until he could repay what he owed. You see, God requires us to forgive people because he forgives us. Imagine if God didn't forgive you for half of the things that you've done. That would be a heavy burden on your life. Because we don't just forgive to be blessed, but we forgive in order to heal. By forgiving somebody for hurting you, you've now healed yourself. And you also kind of release that person as well to begin their own process of healing. So it's like we work as a collective. You know, you forgiving somebody helps them to go on and forgive the next person. That's leading by example. And then the final bubble. This bubble, I saved for last because it was one that I really struggled with when I left the church. And this one is, the church is messy. So when I was in college, maybe 4 months before graduation, I rode home with this girl. And so I knew the girl. We saw each other in passing. We would say hi, but we had never had a conversation. And so on our way back to school, somehow we got on the topic of God and religion and church. And I said to her, you know, I don't understand how we are told to be led by priests who molest boys, how we are told to be led by people who steal from the church or people who still sin. And at the time, her response meant nothing to me. It literally went over my head. But now I understand. What she said was, Brittany, you're not going to church for that person. And honestly, what that person is going through is their story, not yours. And so now that I think about that, what she was honestly saying to me was that while that person is currently a mess, that's a part of their journey. That's a part of their path that will later make them who God has called them to be, if they choose to get in alignment with God. Because honestly, we've all been a mess. And when you and I were in our messy states, so many people were able to observe us and say, you know, wow, she is a hot mess. But that made, and I'll speak for myself, that made me who I am today. The messy person that I was is what made me who I am. You know, that's what God used to straighten my life out. So we can't judge other people by the mess that they currently are. That's not why you're in the church to begin with. to understand that there is no way possible for us to have so many people under one roof, the roof of the church, handling their mess, understanding their mess, and for the atmosphere to not sometimes get messy. That's why leadership is important in the church, because you have to have revival and you have to sense when your church needs the restoration of a revival session. You must know that. Some churches have revival quite often just to keep that energy away, just to stop the energy before it could even fully manifest throughout that congregation. I mean, if I'm being honest, there are messy people in the club, but somehow some of us still find our way there every Friday and Saturday. So what I'm really saying is that as you pop those excuse bubbles, God can show you your comfort levels, the comfort levels that are restricting you from truly growing into who you feel you should be. I remember I was having a conversation with this guy, and we were talking about church, and he was like, Brittany, I don't like going to church because every time I go, God is talking directly to me. It's like it's just me and the preacher in the room, and the preacher is speaking directly from God. And so I let him know. I was like, well, that just means God has been trying to have a conversation with you. And he's going to keep doing it every time you step into the sanctuary because you're not listening. God reaches out to you. And he will continue to reach out to you until you answer him and obey. And I can guarantee you he gets louder and louder every single time. So it's important to go to church because church is your ready position. It's how you ready yourself to get your move from God. It's where you get your tactical training. I think it's also important to understand that believer or non-believer, the objective of everyone's life is to win. Everybody lives life wanting victory. Victory meaning whatever that is for you, whatever your level of success is, that's your main mission, believer or non-believer. However, for the believer, our strategy to get to our objective is a relationship with God, is to walk with Christ Jesus. That is our strategy. But every strategy has to have tactics. And so I want to break it down a little more for you so that you can understand what I mean by objective, strategy, and tactic. So the word objective is defined as a thing aimed at or sought. It's a goal. The word strategy is a plan of action. And tactic is defined as a plan or procedure for promoting a desired end result. So the tactics make up your strategy, and your strategy gets you to your objective. So our strategy as believers is to walk with God, know God, build that relationship with God. Our tactics, we have many, and church is one of those tactics. So it's important for you to, in order to get to your objective, learn the tactics. Learn the tactics because that builds your strategy. Once you learn the tactics, then go teach somebody else the tactics. I want us to look at a story in the Bible, and I heard it months ago, probably even a year ago, and it touched me. Then this was before I had decided to move forward with Be the Influence. It was before the platform. It's Judges 2, verses 6 through 11. And it reads, after Joshua had dismissed the Israelites, they went to take possession of the land, each of their own inheritance. The people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gosh. After the whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. This is why it's important to learn the tactics and then teach the tactics, so that you can explain to the future generations why we do the things that we do. We can't let go of the church, because honestly, the church has been a part of our community for more generations than we can truly name. Just thinking about post-slavery, what's considered to be the Reconstruction period. The church gave so many resources for our people outside of spiritual growth. That's the main mission. But the church provides so much more. Do you honestly believe that church bombings and burnings are a part of our history because hate groups were born? No. The enemy can see an anointing sometimes better than we can. And so I'm not saying just go to church because you need to, because it's right. Ignore the fact that it's leaking. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is you have to find your purpose in that leaking church. God has you in that leaking church for a reason. Maybe your reason is to put the bucket under the crack so that the water doesn't stain the carpet, while somebody else in that church learns how to patch the hole. Maybe that's why you're there. Or you could probably be there to patch the hole. I don't know why you're in that leaking church, but I can guarantee you that if you leave the leaking church, you will never find out why you were there to begin with. God is intentional. God's intentional. I promise you, God is intentional. So what I want to encourage you to do is find the church for you. Find the church that feeds you and never look back. I'm telling you, I am never looking back. That's all I have. So I want you to share the video however you can. Not sure where you are watching it from, but please share. Get it to whoever. I'm very nice. If you have questions, if you just want to talk, message me. I am here so that we can stay connected. Thank you.